Please join me in welcoming Southern California native Patrick Cantlay to the interview area. Patrick, how does it feel to be out here at LACC this week?
It's great. I played golf at UCLA just right down the road for a couple years, and so played here dozens of times. And, they had announced the tournament, I think, around then. So it's been a long wait to get here, and it's going to be great.
Talk a little bit about your experience with the course and then what it's feeling like this week.
Yeah, it's obviously totally different than it has been, every time I've been on property. But I think it'll be a good test. And it looks like it's going to be in good shape, and we're going to get good weather.
I know you're not living here anymore, but does it feel like coming home a bit to be out here? And I assume you have a little more family and friends?
It's definitely familiar, so it feels a little like a home game. And yeah, I'm definitely going to have a bunch of family and friends out this week.
We're going to open it up to questions. Questions?
Doug will ask one eventually, I promise.
We can take one from the WebEx. A lot of talk about the par threes this week, short and long. Do you like a hole that could potentially play 80-ish yards?
Yeah, I've never playing that short. I've never played that hole location before, but obviously I saw it in the Walker Cup and looked like it played darn near just as difficult as some of the really long par threes, so it should be interesting.
One more here. You've played in some U.S. Opens before. The setup feels different. Talk a little bit about comparing it to other U.S. Open setups you've approached in the past.
Yeah, I feel like we haven't played a lot of Bermuda U.S. Opens, so that's a little different. And then also, we haven't seen fairways maybe this wide, but I don't think these fairways will play particularly wide. So it'll still be a challenge, and it'll still be very important to play out of the fairway. So yeah, I think those are the two biggest differences, but I think it'll still play very difficult.
We're going to go back right to Ben.
Hey, mate. Plenty of people have had opinion and comment on your major championship career. How would you describe it?
Yeah, off to a slow start, I would say, and I'm looking to improve that.
You still have reasonable numbers, though, if we're being fair. Have you been able to pinpoint what it might be to even take that up one more notch?
Sorry, say that again. Reasonable numbers for...
Your results are reasonable. It's not like they're not terrible, even though some people might want to pretend they are. So, but what is it to take that extra step so that narrative doesn't exist?
Yeah, just got to play more and win one. So that'll change the narrative pretty quick.
We're going to go back left.
Patrick, as a policy board member, I'm wondering if you anticipate voting in favor of whatever final agreement comes out of PGA Tour and LIV, and sort of what your experience is like, not just being a player who this affects, but sort of having a governing role in how it all works.
Sure. Well, as far as my role, I think it's my role to represent the members as best as possible and to do right by them. And as far as the deal goes, I don't have enough information about the deal yet to have a unfavorable or favorable view about it.
We're going to go to Doug and then Joel.
Two questions. Just on that, I'm just curious exactly where you were when you got the news and what your reaction was.
I was at home in Jupiter, and I got told, I think like most of the other players on the policy board, right before and the morning of. And I was obviously shocked, like I imagine most people.
You don't seem like you get shocked very often.
I try to predict what the future is, but I've been wrong about many things, and I was shocked. I was shocked at this.
One other thing, a little bit off topic, as we talk about this kind of divisiveness in the game. One thing that's getting overlooked now is what we had going on at the Memorial a few weeks ago with the proposal of the rollback of the golf ball. Not so much your position on that, but where do you see that process of the proposal, the feedback, the whole timeline they're on? How do you see that working out in the midst of all this?
Yeah, it obviously pales in comparison when before it was maybe the biggest new issue we were talking about. We had a PAC meeting where the USGA came at Memorial to talk to us about it, and we had the club manufacturers and the ball manufacturers come in right after for the same meeting. And so that was, tensions were high in those meetings. So, but like I said, it takes a little bit of a back seat given all this other stuff going on. I mean, both I think are really, really important. I mean, that sounds cliche or like underplaying it. I mean, they're of paramount importance because they affect every single player on tour immensely. And so I think it's really important not to lose sight of both of the big things going on in golf right now. And I think as players, we need to make sure that we have a seat at the table and understand what the potential changes are and do our best to, I should say for me personally, to do my best to represent the membership as best I can, considering I'm on the policy board.
Do you have any feeling whether they should proceed with it accordingly, the USGA and RNA, given the environment?
I personally think it was bad before the environment, and so I think it would, be even more turbulent in a time of turbulence, which is not what the game needs. The game is in arguably the strongest spot it's ever been. I know rounds in the country are at the highest they've ever been coming out of COVID, and a lot of people are really excited about playing golf. And being in South Florida, all the clubs that around are busy. The public golf courses are extremely busy, so it seems like golf's in a good spot, and doing anything that could potentially harm that would be foolish.
Front left to Joel.
Pat, a few players have alluded to that. Certainly a tough venue. This may facilitate some more fireworks than we're used to seeing at a U.S. Open venue. Do you favor that type of setup, or does your game favor that type of setup, or maybe like the traditional brute of a U.S. Open setup we've come to know?
Yeah, I think when you say fireworks, I think there's just more an extreme collection of really tough holes and then birdieable holes. So I think some of the par fives, like 8, and then the drivable hole 6, although they kind of trick that up so it'll play, I think, more difficult than it ever has for sure. There's just holes where you feel like you should definitely make birdies and give yourself looks. There's some early wedges that you can get, one you can get, but then there's some really hard holes, and especially if you're not playing from the fairway, they can get really difficult. So I think the harder holes may be harder, and the easier holes may be a little easier than a standard U.S. Open.
Front right.
You mentioned number 6. What have they done to maybe trick it up and make it different? And what are some of the factors that you think of when determining whether you're going to go forward or lay up?
Yeah, hole location obviously dependent on laying up or going forward, I think. But the type of grass they planted around that hole is totally foreign and not anywhere else on the golf course. And it's also very chancy, so you could throw 3 balls in there. One could be okay, one could be totally dead, like pitch it out, can't hit the green, and the other could be sitting up fine. And so it puts an element of serious luck in there, considering we're only going to play the hole 4 times. But just the fact that it's just totally different grass. But if you lay it up and hit a nice wedge shot, you're going to have a good look. So it's definitely within the player's control to play that hole well.
On the right to Bob.
Patrick, have you spoken to any of the non-player policy board members and or Jay since this whole thing came down? And aside from us asking you about this during the U.S. Open week, what's the distraction level like, if any, other than us?
What's the strategy level?
The distraction level.
Oh. Yeah, I've talked to a number of people, independents on the board, players on the board, and I've talked to Jay. I'm just trying to get as much information about it as possible so I can, form my opinion. And right now it seems like it's still too early to have enough information to have, a good handle on the situation. And yeah, it's a distraction, but I imagine it's a distraction for, everyone. And come tournament time, it won't be on my mind.
Do you get a sense that this is going to take weeks, months before you'll get a handle or anybody will get a handle on what it really all means?
Yeah, I know there's a policy board meeting coming up in a couple weeks, the week of Detroit. So I hope to have definitely more information by then. And I imagine, after the meeting, I'll have, far more information than I do right now.
We're going to go here, back left corner.
Hey, Patrick, McKenna Keel, Pac-12. As a member of the UCLA Athletics Hall of Fame 2022, wanted to ask if you've had a chance to meet Omar Morales, who qualified this week, and if so, what that interaction has been like, and what advice you would have for him as he heads into the Open.
I haven't met Omar yet, but I did see that he had qualified, and that's great. I'm looking forward to hopefully running into him this week. And I would just say to treat it like, any other tournament that he plays. Get as prepared as you can, and know that if he plays, his own game and plays well, he can compete.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
We're going to go back here.
Patrick, I'm curious, in the times you've been here, have you heard any weird stories or heard any weird noises in the area to the right of the 14th tee?
Yeah, you can hear the monkeys almost every time you go back there. And there's a bunch of other wildlife back there that you can hear occasionally.
Is it distracting?
Not for me.
We're going to go right here.
This morning, John Rahm said there's a sense of betrayal amongst many of the players that they're frustrated about this. Are you hearing that from other players? What do you have to say to, if John Rahm's frustrated or betrayed?
I think it's totally understandable. I think any time that you're left in the dark on a decision that potentially affects you massively, that could easily make you upset. For me, like I said, I'm just trying to understand this deal as best I can, or understand what's going on as best I can. It seems really complicated, and so I don't want to get ahead of myself and form an opinion like that until I know all the facts and know what it's about. But I understand that emotion, and I think it's totally natural and understandable.
Stay on your left with Adam.
Patrick, did shock turn to anger?
No, more confusion about what was really going on, especially with, a lot of the information being information you get from the media, and having just conflicted opinions and stories where I'm not really sure exactly what is going on. I got a broad sense of what I've gathered, and when I've talked to independent directors and then Jay, but I still don't think it's all been worked out. I think it's a process of getting worked out, and I think it's getting worked out right now. And so there's just a lot of unknowns.
Do you think players who stayed loyal should be rewarded for that?
In a perfect world, yeah.
In the current in the real world?
I think the real answer is we'll see, and it hasn't been decided yet.
Anything else for Patrick?
Kind of on the anger side.
I knew you'd get some.
I know.
I knew you'd get some in there.
And a couple in there. I'm just curious, what makes you the most angry on the golf course? And which of the four majors invoke the most anger from you, do you think, typically?
I don't get very angry. Sometimes I'll get frustrated if I feel like I'm not executing how I should. And I don't think I have that at any one major or the other.
You don't get angry on the golf course?
I don't think it ever turns into real anger, but yeah, I get frustrated just like anyone else.
Okay. And lastly, to wrap up this wonderful conversation, as much as you read, do you read much golf news, and did you read a lot last week, and were you entertained?
I definitely read more last week than a normal week. There was much more of it. And that was, I actually looked for golf articles last week, which is very abnormal. Normally they find me.
We're going to go back to Adam.
Patrick, do you think yourself, who's played here dozens of times, the guys who played in the Walker Cup, is there any advantage to that?
I hope so. I feel really comfortable with, knowing where I need to hit it. And I don't think it's, it's still the same golf course. It just is playing a little tougher, a little firmer and faster than I've seen. And obviously the rough is a lot more penal than I've ever seen it. And the fairways are effectively a lot narrower, but I still know exactly where I need to hit it. And so there's not a lot of uncertainty about how I should play the golf course.
Great. Well, Patrick, thanks for your time.
All right, thank you.
Who do you want?
Oh,
I got one more. As a proud Servite grad, not only did you play UCLA, but obviously, what are you going to tell those kids that from that team that are used to making all the noise in the basketball games? What are you going to tell them when they come to root for you this week?
Well,
Any messages for them?
Yeah, I hope I can put on a show for them and give them something to root for. All right. Thanks,
Thanks, Patrick.